Yes.
Okay, great. So I started, for those who didn't hear, I started about saying how wonderful Helen was, how much we miss her, how much she's the one who gave us the strength to jump into the sovereignty water. When in 2011, it sounded crazy. 10 years have passed since then. The issue of the application of sovereignty has not only become part of our consciousness, but even was discussed at the White House. And what do we do? The question is, what now? And we are in a complex situation, as I was saying. If a few months ago we thought that sovereignty was going to happen right away, we realized it wasn't so simple. The deal of the century, on the one hand, advanced the idea of sovereignty and recognized the right of the Jewish people to settle in its ancestral biblical homeland, which of course was a step forward. But then somebody unfortunately added to the deal of the century a trap that we, thank God, did not fall into. It revived the suicidal idea of the creation of a Palestinian state, something we could not accept even in theory. After all, we have advanced and we are promoting sovereignty precisely to bring the issue of the two-state solution off the table. And so we couldn't agree to that. Some people in our national camp are saying today, after the results of the US elections, that we who opposed the deal of the century missed the opportunity for sovereignty. Let us make it very clear that is a complete distortion of let's call it a distortion. What was offered in the deal of the century wasn't real sovereignty. It was fake sovereignty and the real agreement to the creation of a Palestinian state. After all, the plan talks about allocating 70% of the area to be designated for a Palestinian state. In other words, you are issuing a slow death sentence on the 30% of the Jewish settlement, who will not be able to develop and will be strangled. Not to talk about the very weird, if not to call insane idea of giving an additional 30% of sovereign Israeli land from the Negev to this supposed Palestinian state. So we have to thank those in the Yesha Council for opposing the deal of the century that linked together sovereignty and the creation of a Palestinian state. As we say, oy vey had it been accepted, even knowing the results of the is there a problem again?
No, good.
Oh. Even, I mean, maybe there's a problem with what I say, but not with the voice. Okay. We would have had a commitment of people on the right to a Palestinian state and no real sovereignty. The fact that the majority of the Yesha Council was so outspoken in representing the ideological commitment to Eretz Israel without winking or wavering was, in our eyes, a real tikkun, a correction to the damage that the Yesha Council had done in 2005 with the uprooting of Gush Katif, and it is better not to remind ourselves this whole period of time, the dark days of then. So today at the head of the Yesha Council sits David El-Khiani, and we strengthen his hands and his friends who were not afraid to stand firm despite the enormous pressure on them and despite the bad-mouthing against them, as if they had missed the opportunity for sovereignty, when really they saved us from a tragedy. Nobody wants sovereignty more than us and the Yesha Council, but we want real sovereignty and not a candy wrapped in poison. Unfortunately, because of the latest challenges of the results of the US elections, and because of the complications in the Israeli government, and the challenges, of course, of Corona, some people on the right today are saying that maybe we should put sovereignty on the side, should put it aside for a while, and we should maybe just focus on trying to get small achievements on the ground, like receiving more building permits, like maybe making some outposts, kosher them to make them kosher. And maybe we should forget the political battle for sovereignty. The main message I have, and the main message that Yehudit and I have tonight, is that we are not allowed to do that. We are not allowed to put sovereignty aside. We, of course, favor all actions on the ground. Yehudit and I, as you know, come from there, and you, our dear Afsi friend, you were with us, and you are with us on the ground all the time, whether it was in the years of Jdema and Netzer and Eitam, and of course, Oz V'Gaon. But only focusing on local battles is like emptying the sea with a spoon. While we Jews try to save here and there a hill, another outpost, the Arabs are funded by billions of dollars from the European Union and other anti-Israeli organizations and NGOs, and they're taking over the land everywhere. Not only area A and B, which is bad enough, which is also ours. So we have to remind ourselves that A and B are ours also. But also mainly area C. There's a battle now over area C. As you know, Judea and Samaria, because of the infamous Oslo agreements, have been divided into A, B, and C. A and B is 40% of Judea and Samaria. Area C is 60%. And the battle on the ground is at its peak. Every minute that we speak now on the phone, we know that there are tractors out there of Arabs taking over illegally more of our land. And you surely, I am sure that you heard Regavim and Meir Deutsch and their wonderful work that they are doing in exposing the illegal takeover of our land. But what is the answer to that? How do we stop the Arab theft of our land? To try and build another 100 units? Of course, that has to be done. We don't want 100 units. We want new yeshuvim. We want thousands of units. But should we only focus on the little battles? And we think that not, in our humble opinion, we cannot parallel to the local battles, which of course have to go on. And please don't misunderstand as if I'm against any of that. It has to go on. But parallel to that, we cannot dump for a few years, as somebody suggests, even on the right, the issue of sovereignty. Sovereignty is the answer to those terrible things that are going on. The dismantlement, we need to also talk about the dismantlement of the PA and the application of Israeli law, because one goes with the other. So the last thing that we need to do now is to put sovereignty off the table. First of all, sovereignty is not a fashion that you can sometimes decide to put or not, it's not a seasonal thing. It's not depends on up and down. Sovereignty is a matter of values. First of all, from the Torah. The Pasuk says, "V'horashtem," you will, "V'horashtem," the translation by the Ramban, he interprets sovereignty from a Zionist point of view, exercising our right to the land. It's not enough to just live in the land. In order for us to fulfill the commandment of V'horashtem, there has to be under our sovereignty. Sovereignty establishes our right to the land. Secondly, if indeed Biden will be the president, the two-state solution will be revived even more. And as a contra to the vision of the two-state solution, the answer is not, please let us build another 100 units, or let us kosher, make a few outposts kosher. That has to be done, as I told you, anyway, quietly, it has to be done. But versus their distorted vision, we have to put our vision, and our vision is sovereignty, not 100 units. And even if, let's say, in the next 4 years, it might be that actual sovereignty will not be implemented, that doesn't mean we have to stop promoting the vision. At the contrary, lahavdil, if we compare ourselves, or if we compare what is going on the left, when President Trump came to power and the right wing came to power in Israel, did anybody on the left say, well, maybe we should put the two-state solution off the table for a while? They didn't say that. Why should we put sovereignty on hold? At the contrary, now more than ever, we need to go out in a blitz of hasbara nonstop. We must explain that the application of sovereignty, which is, as I know you know, but in AFSI, which is the application of Israeli law over Judea and Samaria, is what is necessary for both Israeli and not only Israeli, American interest also. So the first thing that we're calling upon tonight is that we have to go onto a hasbara blitz, why sovereignty, and remind ourselves and repeat it, and not be afraid to repeat it all the time, because it has to go into our minds. Sovereignty is the true normalization. Number one, it will bring an end and final resolution to the 6-day war. We won the 6-day war, but we won physically, but we didn't win legally. We didn't do what we should have done, the 7th day, and apply law and include those areas legally within the state of Israel. Had the government of Israel done it then, we wouldn't be talking, we wouldn't be promoting sovereignty, all would have been much better. But at the time, the government decided not to decide, thanks to heroes like the Rabbi Levinger and Rebbetzin Levinger and Rabbi Hanan Porad and all those heroes and pioneers who decided that we should. They knew what should be done. They renewed Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria and started the settlement movement. And thanks to them, we have over 500,000 Jews in Judea and Samaria. But the government, unfortunately, still decided not to decide, and that puts a very big question mark over the area. So application of Israeli sovereignty will finally end and give a resolution to the Six-Day War. Sovereignty will finally bring normality. It is not normal to have a situation like today where the IDF controls the area. The communities and 500,000 Jews are operating under military rule. What is the message that Israel conveys when it doesn't apply its sovereignty? The Arabs and the world understand that Israel hesitates to include this area as part of the state of Israel. Israel shows it is not sure of the justice of our cause, doesn't call out that it is her historic land, when we all know that Judea and Samaria are the heart of the land of Israel. This is where Jewish history flourished. Shechem, Shiloh, Beit El, Jerusalem, Hebron. Yes, we know that some people say today the flag of Israel is over Hebron, is over parts of Hebron and Beit El, but it's also Shechem and all of Hebron. When for 2,000 years the Jews have been praying to return to Zion, it was to return to these places, not to Eilat, discos in Eilat or pubs in Tel Aviv. Number 3, Judea and Samaria, the Jordan Valley and the lowlands are one geographical unit. It is impossible to divide, not security-wise, not economically, and not ecologically. Number 4, sovereignty is a natural path of progress for Zionism. The application of sovereignty will bring about the implementation of our right to this land, first of all, according to the Torah, which is, of course, the most important one, according to history, according to the geography, international law, even according to international law, since the San Remo Conference in 1920. We all know that. I don't have to explain to that. And to AFSI people, you all know that. And especially according to justice. Number 5, sovereignty will bring about economic growth. By developing to the east, Israel will be able finally to free up lands for building, to build new communities, to lower housing costs, to absorb aliyah, to cause a redistribution of population between Hadera and Gadera. In 2048, there will be more than 20 million people west of the Jordan. Where exactly will they live if, heaven forbid, we will not have all of Judea and Samaria? And again, 30% is not enough. Sovereignty was number 6, will make sure the Jewish majority that exists today between the sea and the Jordan River will be kept. The creation of a Palestinian state, on the other hand, God forbid, will enable millions of Arabs to flow west of the Jordan and will overturn our Jewish majority, God forbid. And number 6, Israeli sovereignty between the sea and the Jordan River is, as we mentioned, also an American interest, because only if Israel controls Judea and Samaria totally, will agents hostile to the US, such as Russia, China, Turkey, and ISIS, and others, be prevented from entering the area. We could go on and tell you all the wonderful things that sovereignty will bring, but then someone will rightfully ask, and they always ask, wait a minute, what will happen with the 1.8 million Arabs who live in Judea and Samaria? And our answer to that is, first of all, like every good Jew, an answer to a question is always with a question, correct? So our answer to that is, what is preferable? That they should rule? That they will be sovereign over this area? Or we? The answer is clear. And in Jerusalem today, we have a situation like that. It is preferable for Israel to control the entire area than for a terrorist entity to control it. We have learned enough painful lessons from the abandoning the Gaza Strip. Then you will ask, what will be the status of these Arabs? People ask that at lectures. What is the status? What it will be? So we like to quote our Arab friend from Jericho, Bassam Eid. It's always better to quote an Arab with this answer. And also Sheikh Tamimi from Ramallah, who said clearly, we understand that Israel cannot give us citizenship. We the Arabs, many of us, and I think that he represents the majority, we prefer the status of residents under Israeli sovereignty over citizenship in a Palestinian state. The moment that the axioma becomes clear that it is impossible to surrender 1 inch of a God-given biblical heartland, because this land is not to be divided, and that for the good of the Jews and the non-Jews in Israel, it is Israel who must be sovereign over the entire area. In the end, the right formula will be found. So what is sovereignty? It's a solid Jewish majority between the sea and the Jordan River, in Israel being the nation state of the Jewish people, and a non-Jewish minority who are faithful to the state of Israel. And obviously part of that formula includes, or it will be certainly help, includes mass aliyah and encouraging Jewish childbirth. But we cannot conduct a talk about sovereignty by only talking in theory. When I'm dealing here with AFSI people, I am sure that many of you are saying and are rightfully asking, Tachlis, Nadia, Yehudit, what do you suggest should be done now? We all favor sovereignty. You reminded us why sovereignty is important, and it is good to be reminded. But Tachlis, let's get to the Tachlis. And Yehudit and I, we know we also talk like that. We also think that, and we also always want to get down to the Tachlis. So we just spoke about that, Yehudit and I, at another Zoom meeting 2 hours ago. Member of Knesset Ariel Sharon invited us to be part of a Zoom meeting in the Knesset about exactly that question. And there Yehudit spoke in Hebrew. And as Yehudit said, and I'm passing on the message that we passed on in the Knesset just really 2 hours ago. Tachlis, we have now 2 months before the next president will come in. And then we have 4 years. The next 2 months, we must try and promote sovereignty of the Jordan. We must try and promote sovereignty. And we thought, Yehudit and I, that we have to have our feet on the floor. Obviously, we're not going within 2 months apply sovereignty between the sea and the Jordan River. We are, on the one hand, ideological, but on the other hand, we also are realistic. And if we want to be realistic, something that could be promoted is something that is in the consensus here in Israel, is the Jordan Valley. If we promote within the next 2 months, and we start a campaign very soon calling for the application of the Israeli sovereignty over the Jordan Valley first. When you say the word first, that you obviously make it clear to everyone that it's not enough. You want to go further. So that is number one. That is what we thought should be promoted. Even not only the entire right-wing Knesset members and ministers are in favor of it, but many people in Kachol Lavan, in blue and white, also favor the application of sovereignty over the Jordan Valley. I'm throwing these to you as food for thought. Let us not forget also that we are approaching Israeli elections, and therefore elections are always a time where you can push more because the message will be clear to those members of Knesset that we will support them if they support what the platform of the right is, which is sovereignty. So the next 2 months, we think we should start the wheels going for the promoting the Jordan Valley first. Then the next 4 years, no matter who will be president in the US, we must, number one, keep sovereignty in the consciousness. I gave a whole talk about that to you a few minutes ago, and so I don't have to repeat why. Number two, we must correct the distortion that was created as if sovereignty must be linked to a Palestinian state when it is exactly the opposite. Sovereignty has to be promoted without a Palestinian state and cannot be promoted with a Palestinian state. That has to be corrected. Number three, we must come up with a more concrete plan as to what to do with the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. And here we want to throw something to you, AFSI friends, food for thought. Yehudit and I are thinking of...
I'm just listening to a webinar. Yeah, okay. And I'll call you after, okay? Bye.
Well, number three, we think, Yehudit and I, that we must come up with a more concrete plan as to what to do with the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. I touched on it a few seconds ago, but an idea we had, and again, because this is not a frontal lecture that we're giving to you. This is like a brainstorming with you, Judy and Afsi. We were thinking that maybe of reviving Rabbi Benny Elon's plan and expand his idea. For those who don't remember, or for those who don't know, Rabbi Benny Elon spoke about giving to those Arabs who want citizenship, he was talking about Jordanian citizenship. I don't like the word Jordan is Palestine, because of course Jordan is also part of Eretz Israel, but we're talking now about citizenship. We found out that we have to come with a plan about citizenship. So Yehudit and I thought about expanding Rabbi Benny Elon's idea, now that there is normalization with Arab countries. And the reality on the ground has changed. Things have changed with those agreements with the Arab countries. We thought that Israel can demand and say to the Arab countries, you want normalization with us? Because let's face it, I mean, those Sunni countries who want peace with Israel, they want something in return. And they do it because they want a connection with Israel. Sudan and others. You want Israeli technology? You want Israeli medicine? You want our help with agriculture? Well, it comes with a package deal. You give X amount of Arabs from Judea and Samaria citizenship, Sudani citizenship, or any other Arab country, 200,000 Arabs here, 100,000 Arabs there, etc. And then we will agree to make peace with you. Like, why is it always that we have to make concessions? Why did we have to put sovereignty off the table to make peace with the Emirates? Why couldn't we say exactly the opposite? You want peace with us? Well, you give citizenship to X amount of Arabs, and you'll get peace with us. Peace with Israel is something good for you. So we thought that is what we thought of as adding in the next 4 years to revive the idea, to expand the idea. We know that what most Arabs want here in Judea and Samaria, for those who know the Arabs here, they don't even want a Palestinian state. They want a passport, that could be, to be able to leave. Or they want a passport, whether it's permanently or on trips. And I repeat, Israel cannot and rightfully will not give 1.8 million Arabs citizenship. Israel with Judea and Samaria, on the other hand, is the nation state of the Jewish people. And we want to keep Israel a Jewish state. So there are Arabs who live here. Bevakasha, as we say in Hebrew. We can find a plan that will be good for Jews and Arabs without giving away 1 inch of our God-given biblical homeland. Those different points that I just discussed, I'm throwing to you as food for thought, as brainstorming together. I want to finish, because I know that we're going to have questions afterwards, so I'd rather give time for questions. I want to finish by saying a few more things. First of all, remembering the quote that it is not important what the nations of the world say, it is important what the Jews do. And therefore, no matter in the end, no matter who is president in the United States, Israel must act as a sovereign nation and do what is good for Israel. Sovereignty cannot and will not be off the table. We believe, Yehudit and I and everybody here in the sovereignty movement, that ultimately there will, please God, be sovereignty, because this is the divine plan. Awareness must continue to be inculcated. There must be not even one day without a call for sovereignty. Newspapers, announcements, billboards, hasbara, podcasts, social media, everywhere, because that is the plan of the national camp. And with Israeli elections coming up, everybody's now is talking about March, April, who knows, we'll see. In any constellation, Biden or Trump, Israel must have a strong white right-wing leader and leadership without fear. Like Yitzhak Avinu, if we started with Yitzhak Avinu, we have to remind, we don't give up. We dig new wells and spread the message of sovereignty. Like we cannot stop the water from running, we cannot stop the message of sovereignty from running. And I want to finish by telling you that we are big optimists. Yehudit and I and everybody who works here in Israel on sovereignty. We are not taken aback by the difficulties. And you know what gives us strength? If I started by telling you that Helen's message is the one who gave us the strength at the beginning in 2011, you know what gives us strength is the youth. I don't know if you know, but we, when we started sovereignty at one point in 2000, like 3 years ago, something like that, Yehudit and I were in one of our big conferences, And, you know, working with Yehudit Katsover is working with a turbo. It's like you're in the middle of something, she's already looking at the next event. We're in the middle of a great lecture, a conference in Yerushalayim. I was so happy. I was like just enjoying seeing over 1,000 people there. But no, with Yehudit, there's no enjoy. You have to right away go on to the next mission. She says, look at the people. They're all our age. Where's the youth? Is a organization that doesn't have youth, doesn't have a future. We must get the youth. And then happened the miracle. Soon afterwards, we didn't know how to connect to the youth. We didn't know. And God sent us this phone call. We got a phone call from some youth who called us and said, are you part of the sovereignty? Did we reach the sovereignty movement on the phone? We said, yeah. Well, we are youth and we just were called by a different organization to come and try to prevent the destruction at Netiv Avot. If you remember that 2 years ago, there was because of Shalom Achshav and because there was no sovereignty, Shalom Achshav succeeded together with the help of the Supreme Court here in Israel in destroying quite a few buildings not far from here in Gush Etzion. So the youth told us, we were there, but we are sick and tired of being called every time that there's a destruction. You call us and throw us down in front of the security forces to try and prevent something that is too late. We came to the realization that had there been sovereignty, there would be no destruction. And we want to work with the sovereignty movement. We want to be part of that. And to make a long story short, of that one phone call almost 3 years ago, we found amazing youth who little by little and step after step, and also thanks to a lot of help of many of you listeners and of Afsi and Helen, we were able to turn them into a sovereignty movement mamash, into a youth movement mamash. And every Hanukkah, they're so organized and they're so into, you know, social media, which Yehudit and I are completely not. And thank God they know how to use social media and how to make movies, etc., etc. And they are not deterred by anything, and they continue, and they're now doing all kind of campaigns. We're trying to give them a lot of free action. And the next event, and we started with Helen, so I want to finish with Helen, my talk. The next event, please God, is very soon on Hanukkah, will be their next conference, where they themselves they're yearning for conference, they're yearning to learn how to pass on messages, how to talk about sovereignty. And those are kids who are real kids who just listen to the speakers. It's amazing. And the next upcoming conference will be in memory of our dear Helen in Oz Vegaon, with amazing speakers who will teach the youth on Hanukkah, the holiday the holiday of sovereignty, where we are reminded that even if we feel sometimes that we have a few people, the few, when they have the justice of the cause, the few, and they have Hashem and the Torah and our right to this land, then the few always overcome, even those who are more, the many, and the Jewish people will overcome. So that is our message today. And I think it's very fitting that this conference will be in memory of our dear Helen, who gave us so much strength, and she should be proud, and she'll be happy to see Bashamayim, the youth who continue her message and who continue what she gave us the strength to start. So dear Afsi friends, I basically pass on to you our message. I passed on to you some food for thought, and I'll be happy now to answer some questions if you want, and if not, we can do it by email, whatever Judy will decide. I finish by telling you one thing, which if I have another minute, one of the things that the youth did, it's so amazing. We got a phone call this week of one of the youth who, they divided themselves. They're so organized that almost in every area in the land, there's sovereignty youth, especially in the big cities, Herzliya, Ra'anana, everywhere, representatives of the sovereignty youth everywhere. And just to show to you what the tachlis is, again, I like to talk about tachlis, not only about in theory. One of the youth got in geography, got an assignment to do some paper on, I don't remember what it was, on some paper about something in the land in geography. And the teacher gave them a map. And she had to do something about the population growth. Now remember, about the population growth in the country. And she got a map from the whole class, got the map of the country in a certain book. And this girl, Hodaya, her name is, looked at the map and she sees that Judea and Samaria, completely gray, completely empty, nothing is written on it, like Gaza. And she goes with her mouse of the computer to that area because it was on the computer, and it says all of Judea. And she lives in Shomron, and she goes with her mouse of the computer on that area, and it says there are no name. There's no information about this area. She couldn't believe it. She says, "What? We're off the map. My yeshuv is not part of it, and we 500,000 Jews are not considered part of the map." And this Hodaya, who's 16 years old and part of the sovereignty movement, and who came to so many seminars, launched a campaign against this. They're in the middle of this campaign, and now the teacher has to answer why she's using this book, etc., etc. To make a long story short, this girl is now launching a whole campaign against this geography book and is going to make sure it's not going to be used again, etc. One more story. So there is also tachlis on everyday things that is being done thanks to the sovereignty youth and thanks to the fact that we were able to inculcate in them and educate them about our right to this land. And there's something going on in Atarot in Yerushalayim, which on Thursday we're going to visit there, and maybe there will be another flag that we will raise. The building of Jewish buildings in Atarot. I can't give you too many details about that, but you should know that it's not only theory, it's very, very tachlis. Sovereignty is alive and well, and together with you, AFSI friends, we will continue to promote it till Be'ezrat Hashem, we will have sovereignty between the sea and the Jordan River. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nadia. That was just a wonderful, wonderful talk. And I have so many questions, but I'm going to take a little bit of leader's privilege here and ask you. I've heard actually from Regavim that the Abraham Accords are a block to declaring sovereignty. Now I know I've read the Abraham Accords between UAE and Israel, and it's in the whereas clause that I found that they're actually talking about realize a negotiated solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that meets the legitimate needs and aspiration of both peoples to advance comprehensive Middle East peace, stability, and prosperity. It's not the actual agreement. It's one of the whereas clauses. What do you have to say about that?
We certainly, what we have to say is that we are not against agreements with Arab states as long as they don't harm our right to our land. And we are very worried about what you're saying now. And we certainly are worried that one of the conditions and the secret clauses of the agreement with the Dubai and agreement was that a promise by the prime minister to put sovereignty off the table. And our question is that we ask really, do shopping malls and amusement parks and duty-free justify surrendering the vision of sovereignty, surrendering the continued building in Judea and Samaria, and accepting the principle of a Palestinian state? We certainly have a problem with that. And precisely because of the need of these Sunni states for a connection with Israel and their strong desire to have a connection with the US, we ask that question: why can't Israel demand that the relations must be based on accepting us as we are, Zionists who are proud to preserve the land of Israel, our entire homeland, and our security interest? Why must Israel again be expected to surrender? And certainly it hurt us that our right-wing prime minister has made it possible for obviously he's part of that. And those are the questions we ask. And we certainly, because we are coming up to upcoming elections, we're going to have to think very very strongly as to who we support, and we will pass on a message to, not as a sovereignty movement, because the sovereignty movement doesn't support one party, or we are apolitical, and we're talking about each and one of us as Jews who are pro-Israel. We will have to pass on the message to our leaders. If you want to be elected, you have to bring back sovereignty on the table. You have to make sure that you also do agreements with Arab states, but you do not harm the sovereignty.
Okay, thank you. So on the same thought wave, Irene Goldfinger wants to know, what does Naftali Bennett think of applying sovereignty now? And do you think he could be prime minister in the next election?
Well, the best is to invite Naftali Bennett, and I would love for you to invite him. We have a problem with what he said yesterday. I guess that's why you're asking that. Who asked the question? Irene?
Irene, yeah.
Irene, shalom. Yesterday, first of all, we all know that Naftali is in favor of the sovereignty plan, at least what he promotes, and he did a lot of incredible PR and hasbara. When he came out in 2013, 2 years after we started the sovereignty movement, he came out with his plan, which is called Tochnit HaHarga'ah. I forgot how you translate that in Hebrew. So we know he's in favor of sovereignty. We know over Area C at least. But yesterday, again, with AFSI, we don't hide anything. Yesterday, he spoke at some event, and he says that he thinks that now we should only focus on economy, and we should put sovereignty and the Palestinian state aside. He said we should put all the political issues aside. We should talk about sovereignty. We should talk about COVID and pandemic and how to get over Corona and over economy. Listen, he said that because elections are coming up, and he needs a lot of power. But we think that he gets he gets a lot of support because people know he is in favor of sovereignty. Last week in our journal, in our weekly sovereignty newsletter, every time we interview somebody else, and we interviewed Ayelet Shaked, and we asked Ayelet Shaked, is the fact that you guys do not speak about sovereignty, are you putting sovereignty off the table? Is there anything we should worry about? I can only quote her answer. And her answer was absolutely not. There's nothing to worry about. Yamina is in favor of sovereignty all the way, and we will continue to promote it. So my answer to you is, the best would be if you ask Bennett himself. We always have to be on guard and make sure that they will continue to promote what they say they believe in.
We have very little, thank you, that was great. We have very little time left. And so what I'm going to ask you is the last question.